Spade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And today we're going to continue the Kukri knife sheath. And I'm going to explain to you what I've done off camera since the last episode to kind of speed things up a little bit. And it's some of the things that you've seen in my past videos, so I didn't want to take up a lot of time just showing you something I've already done that you can look up in past videos. But what I did was went ahead on the last episode, we drilled all these pilot holes for my stitching, so went ahead and stitched it off camera, and the stitching turned out really nice. I also put my logo on there, stamped it, and I did that with this plastic stamp that I ordered off the internet. I think it was around 25 bucks, but I've used it several times. It still works like brand new. You can buy them metal also, but all it does is just show High Noon Leatherworks maker. So it just puts my maker's mark on there. So you can see the stitching turned out really well. I also wet formed the belt loop, which I'll put two rivets in there to hold that. I was going to stitch it, but I'm going to put rivets in there instead. And then I also wet formed the flap that's going to have the snaps on it that holds the knife in there. So that's the part I did off camera. Today we're going to go ahead and work on the edge, and I'll show you what I'm going to do to that. So come on in and let's get started. Today what I'm going to do, my next steps in this process, is I'm going to sand these spines down. Remember, if you go back, I've got obviously two thicknesses of leather, one on the front, one on the back, and then I've also put a spacer thickness in there. So what that does is that allows that knife to go in and out of there much easier, and you won't cut your stitching with your sharp edge of your blade as it slides down into the sheath. It'll actually run against that spacer in the middle. So I've got a piece of sandpaper. It's 120 grit, and I've got my knife sheath. I've also got some beeswax, and I've got a burnishing tool. And I'm not sure if I've used this burnishing tool on this channel yet or not, but I pick up all kinds of little knickknacks and things that I find at flea markets or garage sales that I know I can use as a burnishing tool. And this one works really good because it's got a nice big handle on it, and then it's got a tapered end. So I like to use that, especially on thicker or wider areas. First thing we'll do is let's take this straight edge here, and I've got my granite down, and I can leave that nice and straight. I've got a nice straight flat surface with that granite, Now this 120 can take off a lot of material, so you want to be very careful and check often as you're doing that. And you definitely don't want to take off so much material that you're getting into your stitching. And I'm not putting a lot of pressure on that. And you can see it's already taken off the high points. See the lighter color? That's the high points. And I'll move my piece around as I sand that down. Now, what that's going to do is make all three of these levels or layers level with one another. Now, if I feel like I'm taking too much off one end or the other, show you what you can do here, because I've got it on a flat surface, but I'm not very concerned about making sure I keep that consistently straight, as much as I want to make sure I maintain the amount of material that I want to keep on there. And if you remember, you go back on several episodes back when I cut this leather, I only beveled it on the outside edges. I didn't bevel any of the inside edges. That's because I wanted to keep that nice and flat in the center. As you can see, taking off some material, and again, I want to take off minimal amount of material. I'm going to fold this piece over and peel that off of there, break that off there, and then go to a smaller piece I can hold in my hand, because I don't want to take off any more material on the ends because they're nice and flat now on both ends. So it's just the center. So now I can just go back and forth and not go all the way to each end. And again, remember, what I'm trying to do is get that nice and flat, so that I get a nice flat edge and all three of those pieces of leather match up. So those are not only stitched, they're also glued together with contact adhesive before I stitched it. So there you can see I got a really nice flat sanded surface, and those three pieces of leather meet perfectly now. So I'll flip it over, I'll do the other edge, and what I really want to be careful here is this edge, there is no flat surface on it where I can lay it down and do it like I did on the backbone of it. So I'll have to use the one by hand, and I'll just have to be very careful to try to keep that amount of material that I take off even as possible as I go through. You can see immediately as you start where your high spots are. See the light color? That's going to be your high spot. So that gives you a really good idea where you need to work and what part of that backbone or that edge that you need to put your pressure on as you're working your material. I've experimented with different grits of sandpaper. I've got a sanding machine, and the only problem with that is it will take off a lot of material very quickly if you're not careful. So on most items, especially small items like this, what I consider small, I would definitely use sandpaper by hand. Now, if I was doing a 4-foot long rifle scabbard or something like that, I would definitely use my machine and just be very careful. So as I move down in these layers, these 3 layers begin to match up. You may see where you need to start working one area or one spot more than any other because you have a low spot or a high spot on one of the layers. Like, for example, down here I've got a low spot on the inside layer, so I'll want to work those other 2 layers just in that spot until I get them down to match up with that inside layer. I'm basically just working that with my thumb in that area. Again, I can turn my sandpaper. And now you can see they're all the same color. I've got them down to the same thickness, and then I'll just keep working my way down. That spine. And again, you want to be real careful that you don't get it at an angle. You want it as flat as possible as you continue sanding. So you might want to stop every once in a while and double check, make sure it is still nice and flat on that edge. And here's a section that the outside 2 pieces, the front and the back, are a little higher than the center. So I just slowly sand that down until we get even on all 3 pieces. And this can become quite dirty. So I'll turn this over and start on the nose or the end. Now I'm down to a very short piece. Down on this end, so I want to make sure I don't go back where I've already got so far this way, where I've already got it the way I want it. I don't want to continue to remove material there, so I want to be careful that I stay on this tip. And again, follow the contour. And then I want to wipe that off. Get all that leather dust off of there. And then you can see how that edge is light in color. And I'm going to clean up my sandpaper mess, move it aside, and clean up my granite surface and get rid of this dust. Next step, again, make sure that you wipe off any excess dust, is I'm going to take my beeswax and I'm going to rub that edge that I just sanded. And all I'm doing is trying to put a light coating of that beeswax on that edge. And you could put some more dye on there too if you'd like. But this beeswax and burnishing will darken that up a little bit. So I'm trying to put a light coating of the beeswax on that edge. And I want it on, make sure I get it on all three pieces. And you can run it along the outside edge also if you'd like. I like to, because I like to make sure I get that part that I beveled. I like to get it coated also. Once you get that coated, you can take your burnishing tool and start burnishing those edges. I would burnish the edges, or I am burnishing the edges first. And if you need to, you can lay it down like so. And then start burnishing the flat part. Again, burnishing seems to be not so much the pressure as it is the speed to get that nice and slick. Now, I could have wet that down with water and burnished that, and it would become nice and slick. The problem with that is it's not going to waterproof that, and that beeswax will put a nice waterproof or water resistant coating on there, and it also seals up any little cracks or crevices between the thicknesses of leather. And you can see that's starting to darken up. There's what it looked like before. And there's what it looks like after you start doing your burnishing. So you're burnishing that edge and you're sealing in that beeswax between those layers, those 3 layers of leather. So that's a nice, smooth, sealed edge now. You can see the shine on it where it burnished it real nice. There's before, there's after. So I'll do the same thing on the back side edge. Make sure that I get it coated with the beeswax real well on all 3 layers of the leather. Get that nose really well. And you can see I'm starting to get a little round area in my beeswax where it's conforming to that backbone. Alright, I set my beeswax aside, take my burnishing tool, start on the edge. Doesn't take much. And then just work my way around that edge toward the flat part. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. And again, the key, in my opinion, is to this is speed of your burnishing tool more than pressure. You're going to have some pressure, but then I can go to the flat part. And what's really neat about this is as I'm burnishing this edge, is it looks like it's wood grain. And it's going to be hard because we got 3 thicknesses of leather in there. So it's going to be a hard edge. But it also looks like we've got wood in there because of those 3 thicknesses of leather. So it gives it a really neat look to the edge, and I'll show you that here in just a minute. Wipe off excess beeswax there, and you can see where those thicknesses of leather are. It gives it kind of a wood grain look. I'm going to put just a little more on this side, on the tip. That's nice and smooth, and now it's very water resistant. So there's my finished edge. And then my next step is marking for my snaps. I've got them marked on my pattern. So what I'll do is pull out some snaps, and let me grab my hardware here. And I do have gold snaps and I have silver snaps. I'm going to use the gold or brass colored ones on this. I just think it's much sharper looking on this buckskin color. And that one looks like the shine wasn't as bright as the other one. So I want to make sure I get 2 of each piece. And then there's 4 pieces. If you got your male and your female, and I'm doing 2. And then I'll need my setter. And then on the outside is going to be my finished piece. So that'll be the solid shiny part. And on the inside will be the male piece. So I'll get my punch and my stylus and my ruler, and I'm going to put these, get my scrap piece of leather to make sure I put it underneath when I punch my holes, but I want these as close to the edge as possible because I don't have a ton of leather there. So I want to make sure that I leave a little bit of space, but I want to make sure they snap also. So I am going to come in 1 inch on both sides. put me a little dot on the leather with my stylus. So even if I move it a little bit, it's still going to be covered up by the snap. And then put that on top of there, make sure that is going to be covered. That looks good. Alright, my battery shut off. So I was double checking to make sure that this was good up and down. It's far enough from the edge. Then when I fold it over and it snaps, kind of want those in the center, and that looks like I'm about good right there. So I can go ahead and punch my holes on the flap. Definitely want to make sure that scrap piece of leather's under there. You don't want to damage the sharpness of your tool by hitting that granite piece. So now you can see, if I put those in there, you can see where the snaps are going to be. The next thing I need to do is grab the knife, put it in there, fold this over, and then make my marks for the other piece on the front. So let me grab the knife real quick. So here's the knife. We'll go ahead and put it in the sheath. It's a nice snug fit. Then I can fold this piece over and mark for my snaps. And I'm just marking in the center of those holes. Pop that back open, take my knife out, set it aside. Then I can put my scrap piece of leather in between there to punch my holes. So you saw I measured off of the first set of holes I put in there to make sure that I was exact as far as where I'm placing those snaps. And I could go ahead and put my snaps on the back through the inside, push them up through the holes, take my setter, put the flat side on the back of that snap, put my snap on, put my setter on, give it 3 good whacks, and then move it down to my second one, put my snap on, my setter, 3 good whacks, make sure they're good and tight, and they are. Now we'll do the other side. Put my snap through, put the female part on, 3 good whacks, make sure it's tight. Put the second one through. Put my setter behind it. Tighten this one up just a little bit. I like to see if I can spin them. I don't want them to spin freely. I want them to be good and tight. And then fold that over and snap it closed. So there's the finished hardware. So let's open it up. Put the knife in there. And the more you put that knife in and out, the easier it's going to be to and there it is. Nice and snug. It's not going to fall out. It's not going to move around. So there's the hardware on the part that covers the knife, and then the finished edges. Alright, there's the next steps in the Kukri knife sheath build. It's turning out very nice. Going to be a nice sheath to carry, protect that knife, and keep it handy for the user. So come on back for the next episode and we'll move ahead on this, and should be finishing it up on the next episode. So please come on back, join me for that. And like I always say, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.